Shabbat Shalom, everybody, Kulanu. Today, our message is entitled, Not All That Glitters is Gold. And Senor Mauricio Quintero took it from the Parashat Chukkat Balak, and this is the translation, which I will read. As I read this week's double portion Chukkat Balak, as our Rabbi advises to do, I stepped back to see this mosaic from a different perspective and realized how the illusion of truth can distort our vision and create false truths. The Emmy-winning writer David Sachs wrote, in Hebrew, the word olam, world, has the same root as ne'elam, hidden. This is because God is hidden in this world. Thus, a dualistic world can be revealed as appearance instead of an actuality. For example, without any experience, who can distinguish between zirconium and a diamond, or costume jewelry from the real thing? For those who are not experts, time will reveal if something is true or not, or we can know it through experience or study. Our Rabbi Yashuv referred to a mashal about wheat and tares. Both are almost identical when they are very young, but as they grow, their differences are revealed, which is why the owner of the field asked his servants, let the one and the other grow together until the harvest. And at the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, collect the tares first, tie them into bundles to burn, but gather the wheat into my barns. That's from Matthew 13:30. And this is exactly the problem in the dualistic world in which we live. When at a certain moment, whether sunset or sunrise, it becomes impossible to clearly discern the messages, the realities, the truths, until it becomes dark or until the light is bright. We begin this portion with the para aduma, the red heifer, which had to be perfect without ever having been yoked, from Bamidbar 19. Its purpose, to be sacrificed. The Torah gives us instructions on how to do it and calls it a perpetual statute in verse 10, detailing how to purify oneself from the waste of this heifer and how to perform the ritual. What is the purpose of this portion? Chapter 19:9 says, it is a purification offering. I wondered, yes, it's a chok, which is an ordinance that we don't really understand. It's a chok, but how does obeying this make me a better person? How does this entire process purify me of my mistakes? Is it the cow? There are sects within Judaism scouring the world in search of the perfect red heifer without a single white or black hair, announcing that this cow is the prelude to the Messiah, to the coming of the Messiah. In my opinion, the red heifer had a meaning for the people at that time. And I agree with Rabbi Maimonides, Rambam, when he mentioned that the red heifer was the mother of the golden calf, which, when melted, took on a reddish hue, thus cleansing the people of the sin of idolatry, and thus redeeming her son. However, as the world darkens, it seems that the red heifer has become hocus pocus, and its legend more important than its practical teaching. Next, we read about the death of Miriam. According to the rabbinical interpretation of Zechariah 11:8, Zechariah chapter 8, verse 11, the three shepherds of Israel died in the same month. Although Miriam died in Nisan, Aaron died in Av, and Moshe died in Adar. It's interpreted that when Moshe died, these three gifts died in the same month, as he had assumed the void left by his deceased siblings. According to the Gemara, by the merit of Miriam, there existed the well of water, which points to prophecy. By the merit of Aaron, The column of cloud points to the attribute of mercy, and by the merit of Moshe, the manna or the man points to the word of the eternal. Now, in this portion, when Miriam died, the Torah states in chapter 20, verse 2, there was no water for the congregation. This immediately follows the verse, and Miriam died. That is the miraculous well that no one realized was always with them had dried up. Then the well was restored through the merit of Aaron and Moshe. Now, before the congregation of Israel, who provided them with water? And again, we enter into the spiritual darkness of this world. For some, it was the merit of Miriam. For others, it was the rod of Moshe. I laugh when I hear these crazy stories of people attributing alien powers to Moshe's rod, saying it was an alien weapon and the source of his power. It is exactly for this reason that Moshe didn't enter the promised land, since he did not raise up the name of the Eternal, but in his fury, he took the glory, the merit for himself or for his rod. We also learn that we must maintain composure even in the most adverse moments in life, because as Psalm 106, 32 to 33 says, they angered him also at the waters of Meribah, and it went ill with Moses because of them, for they embittered his spirit, and he spoke rashly with his lips. As I read this psalm, I realized how easily I can become upset, either with employees, family, friends, neighbors, politicians, or situations that I cannot control. The text continues with another event in which the people spoke Lashon Hara, the evil tongue, or perverse language, when they affirmed in chapter 21:5, why have you brought us up out from Egypt to die in this desert where there is no bread or water, and our soul loathes this light bread? Let's put this into context. Was it true what Israel claimed? How often had the Eternal told them that he had freed them to go to the promised land? Who brought them, Moshe or the Eternal? The problem is that feelings can be expressed based on one single event without thinking or looking back. As a consequence, the divine protection that until then had protected them from snakes in the desert was withdrawn, and they were bitten, as we read in chapter 21, verses 6 to 7. Miriam and Aaron were no longer there to help them, so Moshe was the one who interceded for them, as we read in verse 7, assuming the role of his siblings. How did the Eternal save them? It says in chapter 21, verse 8, make a fiery serpent, put it on a pole, and everyone who was bitten, who looks up at it, will live. Now in chapter 21, verse 9, he expresses, if a snake bit someone and he looked up at the copper snake, he would live. Therefore, we learn that the disease itself became the cure. From this passage, we return to the dualistic world. Who was the one who was saved? The copper serpent on the pole? No, who was the one who saved? Was it the copper serpent on the pole, or was it the Eternal? The cure was not in looking up at the serpent. It was recognizing that his forked tongue, the person, like that of the serpent, was the cause of his illness. It was an act of acknowledgement. And when they raised their eyes to the heavens, to the Eternal, he was the one who saved them. Sadly, we read in 2 Kings 18, verse 4, that Israel turned this serpent into Nehushtan and worshipped it. So it was destroyed during the reign of King Hezekiah. Modern medicine used this as its symbol to express health. And to make matters worse, the Christian world came to a false conclusion about Yeshua due to a misreading of John 3, verse 14, which says, "And just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the desert, so it is also necessary for the Son of Man to be lifted up, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life." Remember, that's a false conclusion. People today interpret that it was Moshe who raised up the snake, but it was by the order of the Eternal, not Moshe. Then when it says that the Messiah must be raised up, it refers to the fact that just as the serpent was the means that the Eternal used for people to recognize their mistakes and look up toward heaven, in the same way, when we learn and follow the teachings of our Messiah, and we raise our gaze toward heavens, toward the Eternal, he is the one who saves us, and he is the one who heals us. Unfortunately, they read it as the Messiah being equal to God. It becomes another Nehushtan. This is idolatry. And they no longer look upon the Eternal, rather they focus on the serpent. Modern medicine has used this as its symbol to express health. And to make matters worse, the Christian world came to a false conclusion. Oh, wait a minute. I think I read that already. Sorry. Where am I here? Sorry. I'll read it anyway. It's okay for us to listen to it again. To make matters worse, the Christian world came to a false conclusion about Yeshua due to a misreading of John 3:14, which says, "Just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the desert, so it is also necessary for the Son of Man to be lifted up, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish, but have everlasting life." People today interpret that it was Moshe who raised up the snake, but it was by order of the Eternal. Then when it says that the Messiah must be raised up, it refers to the fact that just as the serpent was the means that the Eternal used for people to recognize their mistakes and look toward the heavens, in the same way, when we learn and follow the teachings of Messiah and we raise our gaze toward heavens to the Eternal, he is the one who saves and heals us. Unfortunately, they read it as Messiah being equal to God, another Nehushtan, and they no longer look upon the Eternal, rather they focus upon the serpent. Although there are several episodes in which we can see a dualistic world of wheat and tares, I would like to close with the rise of the evil prophet Balaam. Just as Moshe appeared, who clearly saw the Eternal as the noonday light, Balaam appeared, of whom it is said, "He does not see clearly," as we read in 24:3. The speech of Balaam, son of Beor, and the speech of the man whose eyes are opened, the speech of him who heard the words of God, who sees the vision of the Almighty, fallen down, but having his eyes open. In the eyes of the people of that time, Balaam, who's said to be a descendant of Lavan, according to the Midrash, was for them a man of the Eternal and had special powers, because when he spoke, whatever he spoke was fulfilled. However, we see that even though Balaam had special gifts, he was an idolater. Although he knew the Eternal, he also sacrificed to idols, and his ego needed to be constantly fed. His arrogance was to such a degree that he was not surprised when his donkey reproached him for his behavior. How many Balaams rise up in society today in the form of spiritual leaders or gurus? They have many followers due to their special gifts that are conferred upon them by the Eternal. Unfortunately, they lead God's people to destruction in the way that Balaam advised the Midianites to lead the people into harlotry with their idols. In the end, everything was part of the same coin. Moshe did not realize what Balaam, Balak, and his henchmen tried to do to Israel. He had divine protection. In the end, the tares were cut off. We read that Balaam asked for a death like this. May I have a death like that of the righteous, and may my end be like theirs. However, Bamidbar 31:8 tells us that he was killed by the sword by Israel. That is, the Eternal did not grant him a sweet death like that of the 3 shepherds of Israel. Today, the Eternal continues speaking to us in various ways. Personally, when something happens and I have no answers to what I see, I watch, I listen, I hold on to it until the time comes and experience and knowledge appears that allows the truth to come to light and shows me whether what I saw, what I looked at, what I heard or experienced were wheat or tares. It is my prayer today that as a community we grow and that we gain experience in fulfilling the commandments and that we gain in knowledge through the study of Torah. As Rav Shaul wrote in Ephesians 4:14, we will then no longer be infants, tossed about by the waves and blown along by every wind of teaching, and at the mercy of people clever in devising ways to deceive. Let's remember in this dualistic world that not everything that glitters is gold, and not everything that appears to be true is true. Shabbat Shalom.